Before I start this video, I just wanted to make a quick disclaimer because I know that this video is going to be controversial. This is not my theory, and it's a conspiracy theory. So, not exactly real, not rooted in any fact. It's just something that I discovered on the internet that I thought was really interesting and decided to research a little bit and make a video on because I thought it was interesting. My sources are all linked down in the description below, as they are with all of my videos, so if you're interested in reading a little bit more about this or looking into Nostradamus more, feel free, have fun. It's all right down there with links. That being said, let's get into the video. One of the easiest rabbit holes to fall down is that of Nostradamus, the 16th century astrologer, physician, and most notably, prophet. Without providing much detail, Nostradamus's prophecies are specific enough that linking them to particular events isn't much of a stretch, but they're still vague enough to leave plenty to the imagination. That's probably why people have been so obsessed with them for the last 500 years or so, and it's probably why the internet has been obsessed with cracking the code of the third Antichrist. If you've never heard of him before, Nostradamus, also known as Nostradame or Michel de Notre Dame, is a French astrologer and physician from the 16th century. He was born in Saint-Rémy in 1503, and under France's King Henry II, he served as an astrologer. He was later appointed physician in ordinary by Charles IX, and he actually was a physician. He studied medicine in both Avignon and Montpellier, and he treated people throughout France and Italy that had contracted the bubonic plague. After a heresy charge and a few years spent traveling the continent to avoid persecution, Nostradamus eventually returned to France and published his Prophecies, a book of long-term predictions in several languages. This book was first published in 1555, and at the time it only contained 353 quatrains. In 1566, Nostradamus died in Solon, France, and after his death, a different version of Prophecies was published. This one supposedly contained 1,000 quatrains, divided into groups of 100 called centuries, although despite this name, they aren't grouped chronologically or, in many cases, by what event they could possibly apply to. Anyway, of these 1,000 quatrains, there seem to be 58 missing, since there are only 42 in Century 7. This could have been a printing error, but no one is certain. By this point, you might be asking yourself what makes Nostradamus significant today, and why I'm talking about him right now. Well, many believe that his prophecies have actually come true over the years, claiming that he predicted things like the French Revolution, the Great Fire of London, the existence of people such as Charles de Gaulle and Adolf Hitler, 9/11, and a few other notable events and tragedies. The most famous of his predictions might be the ones that describe the three Antichrists. If you're not sure what I mean by that, an Antichrist, not the 2009 horror film, is a person prophesied by the Bible to be the opposite of Jesus Christ and take his place before the second coming. This person is meant to be the polar opposite and mortal enemy of Jesus Christ, and it's turned into a popular archetype in both literature and film. You might be most familiar with this concept from the film The Omen. Like in most fiction, the Antichrist is described by the Bible and other theological texts as having a few standard characteristics, such as being the son of Satan, an earthly tyrant, and having this interesting quality of being both one and many, which basically means that they are both one person as well as their followers. Keep this in mind. This trait will be very important later. It's hard to pinpoint exactly where this false trinity of Antichrists come from. One translation of Quatrain 77 of Century 8 claims that there are three, and that the one being described is the third, but the word Antichrist is only mentioned twice in Nostradamus' prophecies, and that makes it a little hard to pinpoint exactly who are the Antichrists. These mentions come in quatrain 66 of century 10, and as I said, in quatrain 77 of century 8, and you'll want to keep these two quatrains in mind because they will keep coming up. The first quatrain of century 8 is often attributed to Napoleon Bonaparte, our first Antichrist. If you rearrange Pa, Ne, and Loran, you get Nepaloran, or Napoleon, which is the main reason behind why people believe it's Napoleon. Also, I think it's worth noting that in the version I've shared, the third line states he will refuse entry to the Magpies, but apparently some versions have this line written as he will refuse entry to the Piuses, referring to the two popes that were imprisoned by Napoleon, both named Pius. For the second Antichrist, most attribute it to, evidently, Adolf Hitler. Quatrain 24 of century 2 mentions a Hister and a German child, and this quatrain is what people use to say that Nostradamus predicted him as being the second Antichrist. You could argue that quatrains 24 through 27 of this century describe the Second World War, but as with all of Nostradamus' quatrains, they may not be describing the same event, so I would take that with a grain of salt. Century 2 also brings us Mabus, the name of the third Antichrist. This Mabus is only mentioned in quatrain 62, but on screen I've also included quatrain 63 for a very particular reason that you'll understand in a bit. Mabus could be the third Antichrist's predecessor, though many believe Mabus is the third Antichrist themselves. Here's what we know of Mabus. Aside from being the third Antichrist, Mabus is described in century 10, quatrain 72, as the king of terror who will arrive in the year 1999, 7th month. This quatrain says he will bring back to life the great king of the Mongols, and if you don't know where the Mongol Empire was, there's a map on the screen. It spread across Mongolia, China, Burma, Romania, Pakistan, Ukraine, Belarus, Georgia, Armenia, Iraq, and a lot of Russia and Central Asia. There have been plenty of theories of who Mabus is, including him being both Osama bin Laden and one of the Bushes, but this theory mostly stems from discussions surrounding the date. And speaking of that date, and looking at quatrain 63 from century 2, is anything sounding familiar to you yet? There are some theories that state that these ideas that Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, the Bushes, and Osama bin Laden are not Mabus, and not even close to the truth. Some speculate that Donald Trump is actually the third Antichrist. Donald Trump wasn't born in July of 1999, if that wasn't obvious enough. However, as others have noted, he did mention running for president twice in 1999, although he did this in October. The first time he did it was with Larry King, and then he did it again on NBC's Meet the Press in October of 1999. Some say that he first mentioned running for president in July of 1999, and maybe he outright said it then, but I couldn't find any interviews with that date. And I certainly didn't find any for September, though I might be wrong and my research just might not have led me down that road. Moving on, the quatrain's third line describes the King of the East, and there are plenty we could discuss here. Vladimir Putin and how Donald Trump has legitimized Russia's policy of meddling in elections, Kim Jong-un, who he's close with and holds the title of Supreme Leader of North Korea, or any number of kings in the Middle East who he's forged or improved relationships with. And we haven't joined any conflicts since Trump became president in 2016, but we also haven't ended any. Quatrain 78 in Century 8 expands upon this idea, describing him as a soldier of fortune with a twisted tongue that opens the door to heretics and raises up the church militant. While this doesn't necessarily predict the economic crisis that is currently going on, or anything else really, it does certainly more than imply false promises and also false interpretations of the Bible, which happen to apply to a certain group of people that I am not going to acknowledge by name, and that also can't really come at me for this one because I've read the Bible for fun. Centuries 1 and 3 both describe a Libyan prince coming to power and allude to this person being the ally of Mabus, saying that together they will attack Europe, and that Malta and nearby islands shall be deserted, and that France in particular will be attacked. Rita Thriller outlines a few other quatrains that apply to this theory, and they give an idea of what could happen in the future, even going so far as to predict Trump losing the 2020 election, which evidently is correct. We'll see if he ends up retiring to Saudi Arabia, involving himself somehow in the Libyan civil war, and attacking Europe, but I'm not going to get into all of those hypotheticals. There's no way of knowing what will happen over the next 27 years, so we'll just leave that where it is for now. Instead, I would like to direct your attention to yet another quatrain in Century 1. Now, I've included quatrain 91 in this screenshot, but I'm not going to go too much into it because it's not the focus. I just thought it was interesting how it could connect to quatrain 92, so I've provided it. Quatrain 92 is the one that we're focusing on, and it says, "Under one man, peace will be proclaimed everywhere, but not long after will be looting and rebellion. Because of a refusal, town, land, and sea will be broached. About 1/3 dead or captured." This quatrain could be just referencing the nearly 300,000 deaths in the United States over the course of the pandemic, but if we're applying this to the modern-day United States, pay particular attention to the wording. Rebellion, looting, and captured sound quite familiar, don't they? In June, the documented arrest tally during the protests for Black Lives Matter was around 10,000. Conveniently, that combined with the pandemic death toll is about 1/3 isn't it? And wasn't someone claiming that he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize because there is peace everywhere, and he is the facilitator of it? I'm not saying that Donald Trump is definitely the third Antichrist. Like I said, Nostradamus' prophecies are notoriously vague and very difficult to apply to reality. And there are plenty of criticisms for these theories, like that they are hardly predictions and instead are quatrains written by a scholar that were heavily steeped in historical and literary precedent. There are plenty of sources that are contemporary to Nostradamus' prophecies that demonstrate this. There are also plenty of arguments that Donald Trump is one of the most peaceful presidents in American history, which leans more towards being relatively incorrect than anything else. It's true that he has yet to enter the US into a war, but he's increased the use of drone warfare, removed the systems of reporting and accountability for drone warfare so that no one knows the exact number of strikes that have occurred. He's played a large role in increasing the tensions within the United States and the increasing polarization and partisanship. He's left a number of important positions, especially within the Department of State, without appointments, and has essentially set the United States up for at least a decade-long nightmare in any and all fields affected by diplomacy. And need I mention him withholding vital information on COVID-19 from the American public and how he's handled this pandemic? Whether you believe that the theory is true or not is entirely up to you. Like I said at the beginning, I just found this an interesting theory and wanted to share the rabbit hole that I've been trapped in with others. So let me know what you think down below. I'm interested to hear your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one.